and it's a couple pawns, but knight c5, it doesn't look so easy for white to me. The c4 pawn could probably just be scooped up at any time, and white's queen is like in a very strange place. There's this fork here, but all right, you have to calculate all this out, like 4 or 5 moves where there's some choice, and then correctly assess at the end when you're down a couple pawns that you're actually doing okay. So that's why I think bishop b2 kind of a smart practical move, because he took on c4 and then just a3, but then the rook is coming here and white is more active. Knight g4, and here a good move. He plays queen to c1. If he moves somewhere else, like let's say queen g3, then c5, and if you do rook c1, then queen e2, and if rook takes c5, then this is hanging. So queen to e2 suddenly gives strong play. So queen c1 I think is kind of a smart move, offering a queen trade. So let's say you trade, which maybe looks the safest, but takes, and the c6 pawn is falling, and then c7 and e5 are both very weak. So this is going to be a lot of suffering for black. So he tries to stay active and plays queen e2, h3, and this problems here. If you play knight f6, then just rook e1, because there's no more pressure on f2. And again, all these pawns are in trouble. So he plays bishop to e4. Kind of a clever move, because all right, if takes, then suddenly takes here, and now what are you doing to defend? Like if king takes, just queen takes, and then like a rook lift, and it's already just winning for black. So bishop e4 kind of clever. And here another accurate move that's probably like the only move, right? Because like f2 is also attacked, so this is quite scary. But there's just one move, but it's a good move. He plays queen e1. So it's kind of funny, like it hangs the bishop on e2, on b2, but maybe he shouldn't even take. Like, okay, again, this ending. And now I guess he's got f2's hanging, so maybe he takes this way, knight f6. And okay, you could maybe take on e5 right away. a3's hanging, but you threaten bishop f6. So if this bishop retreats, maybe black has some chances to fight here because he's attacking this, and maybe he can do c5 to get some counterplay. So this is not over yet. This was probably a better try than what he did, because he took on b2, queen e4, and now if he does knight f2, which looks natural, then we have queen c4 check, and then kind of a mean little move that would have had to be seen, rook a2, skewering the knight on f2. Okay, maybe black can, give away a piece like knight h3, and take, and still have some counter chances. But he could take either way. He could even take with a queen, perhaps, because everything on the queen side is protected. But I think black's not really looking to give away a piece just yet. And so it's hard to say something like this. Did Shankland calculate it like ahead of time and Gareev missed it? That's the kind of thing you can't really tell without knowing, discussing with the players. But he just retreats, which is a better move. But yeah, maybe he missed the tactics when he took on b2. And now there's just queen c4, king h8, knight takes c6, rook a3, takes, queen takes, knight e5. So this is kind of another interesting scenario, because maybe Gareev calculated this and thought, like, okay, it's not so bad. It's even material. Even if he loses the pawn on c7, you think, well, 3 against 2, maybe there's some chance. But it turns out that white has like this very strong initiative with the knight on e5, and also the fact that black's king side has a pawn less. And Shankland finds like an interesting way to attack. And there's going to be these problems. We already have like this kind of setup for like a potential smothered mate. Okay, it's not going to work just yet because there's always like knight takes g8, but the position is actually really difficult to hold. So he plays queen a5, defending c7 and hitting the knight. Knight f7, king g8. Now notice this does not work because he just takes with a knight, and then you can resign. But just improves his position with rook to d1. Queen h5, knight e5, king h8, rook e1, pretty calm move. Knight to g8, looks a little funny, but probably better to play something like queen e8, queen takes c7, and maybe just try to trade queens and try to hold. Also kind of depressing. But after knight g8, queen takes c7. Black's king position is not really any better, and there's still these problems with smothered mates. Queen f5, queen c5. I think this part of the game, if you look with a computer, Shankland plays very accurately. Knight h6, and now a move I like a lot, which is, of course, the engine's first choice, is g4. So Black's position will turn out to be not as solid as it seems. I mean, there's very limited material, but bringing in another attacking unit will make the difference. And sometimes this happens, like it's just 3 against 2, but that means that White can use a pawn to attack and still have, reasonable pawn cover of his own. And here, I think the only move is queen c8. He just maybe he just didn't want to go into this type of ending where White can really try forever. I've seen some endings like this with Kramnik, like this rook and knight and an extra pawn, and you just keep torturing the guy. And probably he would trade here. I would think. He does queen to f4, but this loses right away. In a very cute manner. This would be a position. If you want to take a moment and pause the video, you could try to find a move that basically leads to a forced win for White. So there's lots of decent moves here, but Shankland found by far the most crushing. He played rook to e4, just a classic deflection. If he takes on e4, then queen takes f8 mate. And the queen really has nowhere to go. It can't go to c1. It can't go to d2. And there's just no squares on the f-file. f7 and f3 are both covered. f5 is covered, so the only square is f6. And then knight d7. Queen a1 check, otherwise you lose an exchange. King h2, avoiding any kind of queen a8 pin. Rook a8, and now g5. And there's really no move here. I mean, he played queen a7, and now White can just trade and take on h6, and he's up a piece. But so that's how the game ended. It ended queen a7 and resigns. But if he plays the only other place you can go, well, okay, if you do knight f7, then queen e7 is very strong because you're hitting the knight, and there's back rank problem. And if you go knight g8, trying to curl into a ball, there's just knight e5, and there's not really any good way to stop knight f7, because the knight on g8 just doesn't have any squares. If you play something like queen a7, then we have funny rook a4. And you can take a rook, you can take a queen, but everything allows a smothered mate. So there's just nothing to do here. So a nice game by Shankland, I think very important theoretically. Shankland came up with a new idea. Gareev, I thought, reacted well, but Shankland still managed to get a little pressure. I think that this is not going to refute the Schliemann, but definitely good for one game, maybe even more than that from White's point of view. And Gareev kind of held his own for a while, but then just got overpowered a little bit, and once he got this advantage, he had like a wonderful technique in this kind of middle game with very few pieces, with everything on one side of the board. So hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on chesslecture.com.